Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In the last episode, I started with the replacement 440 block and worked through everything needed to get it ready for final assembly. I clearanced the block for the 440 source stroke or crank, checked the main journal bearing clearances, did a thorough cleaning and preparation of the block, installed the main bearings, checked the crankshaft bearing clearances before setting the crank in place, and I also walked through installing a rope-style rear main seal before torquing everything down and completing the crankshaft installation. That left us with a properly prepared block, the crankshaft installed and turning freely, and a solid foundation to build upon. Now it's time to complete the short block. So in this episode, I'll go through setting the piston ring end gaps, ring orientation and why it matters, preparing and installing the pistons and connecting rods, and then move on to the camshaft, timing set, oiling system, and the rest of the components needed to finish the bottom end. And once everything is assembled, I'll get the engine cleaned up, masked, and finally lay down some Hemi orange. Let's get back into it. Okay, with the crankshaft all buttoned up in the block, it's time to move on to pistons. These are the pistons that came out of the cracked block, the 440. They're 30 over. They were part of the 440 source kit, and they all are clean now and checked out. They look fine. But I did go ahead and order new Hastings Performance piston rings because I thought, well, we've got a fresh bore, a fresh hone. Why not, since we're here doing this, put new rings in at the same time? I mean, we're putting new bearings in. We're basically building up a brand new engine. Using the old rings would be something I could do. I just thought, let's do new rings. So the only downside of that is I need to go through and make sure that these are all gapped properly to each of the cylinders. That's the process that we're going to go through now. You can see I've got Ziploc bags here for each of the 8 cylinders. And so once we gap the first, second, and third rings for a specific cylinder, we'll put them in the Ziploc bags here and have it ready to go to put them on the piston, and then of course to stab these things into the block itself. So let's get going with filing our first ring. Okay, let's start with cylinder number 1. I've got the top ring right out of the package. Let's see now how close it's going to be to our desired. So we just placed that in there. Now we just need to square it up. You can buy a squaring tool, or you can just use a piston and knock that baby down an inch or so in the cylinder. Like that. And I've got our feeler gauges here. We're looking for 18 to 20 thou on this top ring. There's a calculation that you can do based on the type of fuel that you're going to run, if it's boosted, etc. For this particular engine with this bore, we need the top ring to be somewhere between 18 and 20 thousandths. So let's start simple. Let's start at 10 and see where we're at. Okay, there's the gap there at the top of the cylinder. If I reach in there, 10 fits no problem. Let's try 15. There's 15. And 15 doesn't go. So we know that we're going to have some filing to do. I will just check and see though, are we at 13? Here's 13. Yeah, 13 is where it's at right now. Just a bit of drag, so that's exactly 13 thousandths. So we need to take off, 5 to 6 thousandths to get us into the range that we want to be at. So let's work on that. Okay, we've got a basic manual ring filer set up here on the bench. We've got our ring from piston number 1. A couple things. We only want to file one side. We want to keep one side unmolested so that we always know when we butt these things together, are we still square? So we'll choose one side, and that's the one that we're going to work to file. And then once we do a file, we have to take and just make sure that any burrs are off with the filed edge that we just did before we check with our feeler gauge, because it can interfere with the reading. So that's important. The other thing, of course, is that you need to make sure that when you're filing that edge, that you're as square as possible. And they put these two pins on this to butt the ring up against that, and then to hold it down. And then you can see here I'm set up to grind this particular side here, and then we just work that wheel 1 or 2 rotations, maybe 3. It's a fairly aggressive wheel, so we have to be careful that we don't take off more material than we want to, because if we do, we get past that, say, 20 thousandths range of gap, then it's no good anymore. And so we're back to square one with ordering at least one set of new rings. So this is a really tedious and back and forth laborious process. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do one, and then we'll come back after I finish the rest. So we were at 13 thousandths. Let's take a bit off this one and see if we can get edge up on 18 thousandths. It's a brand new wheel on that, so I just want to be careful. I don't know how much I've taken off there, but feels good. Let's check that back in the cylinder and see if we took enough off. Okay, I checked it, and we took off 2 thousandths. We're at now 15 thousandths. So let's get set up again and take a little bit more off. All right, that feels good. We'll check that one. Okay, now we're up to 16 thousandths of a gap. So a little bit more to do. Okay, got that top ring back in there with an 18 thousandths feeler gauge. Goes in no problem. If we move up to 19, 19, it's in, but a little grabby. Let's just try 20. Yeah, 20 goes in, but it's very tight. So we're right in that 19 to 20 thousandths gap, and that's, for me, happy. Okay, I got the second ring out of the package. Let's start at 18 and see where we're at there out of the box. 18 goes in, so clearly machined closer to the right number. 18 was pretty tight. Let's try 19. 19 does go in. We want this one to be edging up on 22, 20 to 22. We want it a little more gap than the top ring. Let's try 20. Let's see what we got there. Well, 20 won't go. So We've got to open this one up a couple thousandths. Let me run over to the wheel and get that going. All right, back and forth with the filer. Here's a 22 and fits in nice. Fits in nice and snug. I'll try 23. I haven't tried that, but I doubt that yeah, just barely, just a little bit there. So we're good at 22 there. The second one is done. Let's check the oil ring. Okay, moving on to the oil ring. We've got three pieces. We've got the top. These are the same, but there's a top, then the expander, and then the bottom ring. These go together like that. We do not need to check any measurement on this, or certainly not modify it in any way. It's not recommended. However, we do want to make sure that both of these have a minimum of 15 thousandths clearance. We should not have to file them, but let's just double check 15 thousandths clearance, and hopefully we can move on to the next one. Okay, I've got that first one in there. I'll bring up 15 thousandths, and no problem. Just out of curiosity, let's go to 17. See what that does. No problem. Bump her up to 20. Also no problem. So there's lots of gap there. Let's try 22. Yeah, wow. Okay, let's bump her right up to, how high can we go on this gauge set? Looks like 24 is the highest I can go. And it's got 24, so lots of gap on that. We'll just double check the other one. They're all manufactured the same, but we'll double check it before we call her good. Okay, I've got the last part of the oil ring in there. I've got 24 thousandths. Yeah, easy peas. Okay, so we're good on those. All right, we've got all the rings for number one cylinder ready to go. Time to move on to cylinder number 3. Remembering that when we do our measurements now, we're doing it on cylinder number 3. So I got to go through that and of course do that 7 more times. Once I've got that done, we'll be ready for final clean on the pistons, the rods, the rings. We'll get those assembled. I'll walk you through that real quick. And then we'll wipe down the cylinders and we're going to start installing those pistons. As I'm going through and doing this, I came to cylinder number 2, and I wanted to take a moment just to explain again why we keep the rings matched to each of the cylinders, just in case that wasn't clear. Because the reason why we do that is because each of these cylinders, after they've been bored and honed, are close to being the same diameter, but can vary by a few thousandths. And case in point, this is a top ring out of the box, unfiled, where I've been finding normally it's been around a 15 thou out of the box gap. I've got a 19 thou gap out of the box on cylinder number 2. So I'm almost at where I want to be with 20 thousandths without doing any filing. So this ring, once it's filed, let's say a thousandths, has to go back here, because if it goes somewhere else, it's not going to have the same ring gap, because again, the bore diameters are off just slightly. And so again, just want to make sure that was clear. I'm going to carry on here. I've got 4 done, and I'm working on the passenger side bank right now. Okay, I've got all of the ring gaps done, and I've double checked every one in each of the right cylinders just to make sure. So I've got about 20 on the first ring and 22 on the second, and then of course the oil, we're good there out of the box, no need to change. So let's start putting these rings on the pistons, and we'll start with number 2. Okay, we'll start with number 2 for no particular reason. And so I've brake cleaned the piston and blew it off with compressed air, and I've also brake cleaned all of the piston rings themselves and blew them off. So we're starting from a clean base. and everyone's probably got their own way of doing this, but let's start. I like to start with the oil expander, and so just get the piston there between my legs and just slide this over and get it in there. We'll orient them later. And we'll put on the bottom oil ring. Come on now. There. So that bottom ring and the expander's there. Now let's put the top ring on. Always got to be careful not to try and not to scratch the side of the piston when you put those on. Okay, so that's in there beautifully. We'll orient the gaps in a moment, but there, that's in. Now for the second ring, remember there's two rings. There's a top one and a second ring, a top and a second. Now this one here, made from a different material, different coating on it. That one's number one. It goes to the top. So we'll save that one. We'll do number two first. So this is number two, and it's got a bevel on it, and the bevel goes down. And you can see, well, maybe not, but it's in very light laser etch. It says top. So this ring needs to face this way on the piston. This one you can't just spiral on, well, at least not without making a mess of the piston. So I've got these piston ring expanders. You just slide that in, expand it just enough to get it over the piston, and place it into that second groove. There we go. Easy as that. Just double checking the fitment. I haven't had these in there before. Looks good. Okay, so now this is the top ring, and it does have very clearly laser edged top, and that will have bevel up. So second ring bevel down, top ring bevel up. Same process, just squeeze it just enough to get it over, not any more than you have to. Place the back of the ring in the groove and then let it out. And there we go. That's all there is to it. So now let's work on orientation. All right, let's talk piston ring orientation. What you don't want is this, where you can see here I've got all of the gaps lined up on these rings. Top, the second, both the top and the lower oil ring, and even the expander is lined up. You don't want that. This is going to create oil burning, compression issues. You don't want that. So as long as you stagger every one of those away from each other, you're fine. If you want to be exactly textbook as the ring manufacturer would have it, then I've got that laid out here. So we've got the front of the engine right here. This is the top of the piston. This is number two. What they want is they want the top ring gap to be on this side. Again, this is really specific. What's critical is that the gap of the top ring is directly opposite the gap of the second ring, which now you can see the gap of the second one is here. The gap of the top one is there. They then want the bottom oil ring to be over here and the top oil ring to be over here. Again, you could flip those, but they have to give you some guidance in the instructions. So you can see I've got a gap here. I'll take the top oil ring with this pick and just slide that down to there. And then I'll take the bottom oil ring and slide that up to the top. And then the gap of the expander, I've got to find that again, it's right there. I've got to slide that around. That might ruin my orientation of the top. I'll fix that in a second. But let's slide the gap of the extender where they want it. So now the extender gap is over here in this range, which is where they want it. Just double check. So my bottom oil ring did move. So I'm just going to try and hold that rest of things here and slide that over without scratching the piston. There. Now, did I lose my top oil ring? Where did you go? Yeah, it slid over as well. I got to bring it all the way back over. Holding the bottom and the expander. I know this might be tricky to see. I'll show you once I slide this over. Come on. Okay, so I've got, starting from the top, I've got the top ring here. I've got the second ring gap here. I've got the gap for the expander in this location right there. And the top oil ring gap is right here. And the bottom oil ring gap is right there, roughly in the right location. So that's the orientation that we need on this piston. So that's ready to get prepped to go in, compressed. Of course, we got to get the bearing and so on. I'll walk you through that process in a moment. But as it relates to oil ring orientation, piston ring orientation, that's what you want. All right, it's time to slam these pistons into the block. I've got number one right here. I've got the new rod bearings. I've cleaned these with acetone. You can see this was a clean rag when I started. So they do ship with a coating. You want to get all of that crap off. So those are now clean. And I've cleaned the rod as well up in here, the cap, all this with acetone. So it's clean. I've blown it off with compressed air, so we know that we're good there. The piston rings are oriented, so we're good there. As we prep to put this piston in, there's a couple of things that we'll do. We'll put some regular oil up along the pin here, just a couple drops on both sides, just to get that happy. We'll put a couple dabs of regular oil on the skirts, both sides. And then on the block, I've got sitting here ready to go. We'll put, so these have been cleaned with acetone and blown out. So we've got a clean cylinder wall surface, but we will now put WD-40 on here. You do not want to oil these with anything else. No grease, no oil, just light oil. WD-40 works perfect because you don't want to affect how those rings are going to seat when the engine starts up. So WD-40 after I've cleaned each of the cylinders. I've got the crank position so that the journal is all the way to the bottom. That just helps minimize any risk of when that piston and rod go down in. I can guide it and be careful not to damage the rod journal down there because that would set us back. So think we're good there. I've got everything I need ready to go. Let's get set up and let's put this first piston in. Okay, got piston number 1 right here, and I've got the upper bearing. There is a tang on these, so you know which way to put them in. So I'm just gonna slide that in there. Make sure it's centered and good and tight. Okay, so that upper bearing's in there. I've double checked my piston ring gap locations. What I wanted to show you is that there is a direction for these pistons. You can't just put them anywhere you want. I had labeled all the pistons when I took them out of the original engine, so I'm putting them back in the same location to make it easier on myself. But the key thing here is that there's a chamfer on the rod itself and no chamfer on the other side. So this side faces another rod. This side faces the outside of the journal towards the crank. So that's critical to get right. And then of course you want your valve release up like that. So this is how this one's going to go in. And I'm going to go get the ring compressor and we're going to put that on, and then we'll do our full and final prep. We'll do assembly lube in here. As I said, we'll do a little dab oil on the skirts, WD-40 the cylinders, and a little squirt of oil back in here. And we should be good to go. Okay, so let's get these rings compressed. I've got, again, double check on the ring gaps. We're good there. And this is the compressor we're going to use. It's a fairly basic or rudimentary tool. There are much more sophisticated and expensive versions that you can buy to match your bore and just work more effectively. But for what we're doing and the amount of times that we do this, this is good enough. This has an up and a down. The downside facing the block has these little protrusions that will ensure that it stays on top while the piston slides in. So we just slide it over top of the piston, leaving about an inch of the skirt, and then just tighten it up. Excuse me, I just need to use my foot there. So now you can see the rings are compressed, and we've got about an inch or so in there, but importantly, all the rings are compressed and behind the sleeve. So now let's get this fully prepped to go in. Okay, so I've got some WD-40. I'm just going to lightly coat the cylinder walls. Good enough there. We'll put the back side of the piston. We can always do a little bit of this later too, but let's do some now. Just make sure that pin has got nice fresh lube on it. A little bit in here. Now we need assembly lube on the face of that bearing. Just rub that in there. Okay, I'm going to put a little bit on the crank as well. You won't be able to see this, but trust me. Just a little. Okay, So you can now set this in. Again, it only goes, well, you could put it in the wrong way, but this is the way. Remember, the chamfer is facing the side of the crank journal. That's it. And so what I want to do now is just use a rubber mallet. I want to sit down here and I want to be ready. I've got my hand on the end of the rod, and we're just going to make sure that we do this in one swift motion, hopefully, maybe a couple, but we don't want to catch the rings on the edge of the block there. So that's what we're trying for. All right, got you in there now, and excuse my hands, but as this comes down, I want to make sure that that gently lands on the journal. This is where you take your time. There. That's a solid hit, and we're back all the way resting on the journal. So with that, we're going to flip the motor over and we're going to put the the rod end cap and the bearing on there. Let's get that done. Okay, got things rotated over, end of the rod there. I've got the rod cap, I slid the bearing on there. Remember, acetone on both sides of the back side of the bearing, blowing out so it's dry and clean. Bearing goes in. Now we're ready for some assembly lube. Maybe just a little bit more. These are directional, just like the mains for the block, tang to tang. So we've got a tang here. We've got to match that up, and you know that too because we've got the chamfer here. So that goes on like that. Now we'll get the bolts. These are ARP bolts, so we need a little bit of ARP lube on the threads. And then we'll just slide them in. Okay, get set up to torque those. Okay, ready to torque these. These go to 45 foot-pounds with that ARP lube on them. Just gonna nudge them both down so that the cap is fully seated before I torque one side. There. No need to step these. You can go right to 45. Okay, one more double check. Okay, 45, get the marker. Okay, found my marker. Come on, work with me. All right, I think that's pretty good. Okay, So now, what I'd like to do is rotate the crank and just double check our clearance, because this is the connecting rod that we wanted to make sure was going to clear the oil pickup tube port right there. So I'm going to get you set up. We'll watch that. We'll spin the crank and cross your fingers that I did enough clearancing on that, because going back on that now would be a setback for sure. We want to check at least one full rotation to make sure everything is spinning properly. So that's the second part of this test that we're doing. Just got this on here. We're going to just give her a spin, make sure we're happy. We've got lots of clearance there. No issue whatsoever. That is looking happy. So we'll get this down. If we're going to do number 3 next, we'll just bring this journal down to about there and get ready for it to receive piston and cylinder number 3. But there we go. Everything turns freely. I like the way we've got that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do that 7 more times, and I'll pick you up at the end or along the way if I run into something. Okay, driver's side bank is done. No issues at all. Everything turns smoothly. As you can imagine, with 4 pistons in now, it's starting to be harder to turn because of the friction. But there's a couple of things I wanted to go over. This particular ring compressor is wrapped around, right? And so these tighten up together to create the pressure to bring the rings in. But what can happen when you tighten it up against the piston is this inside flap can be out, not that much, but it can be out like that, or it can be down the other way, like this. And you've got to be really careful with that. You want to make sure that when it's ready to go in, that all parts of this metal are flush. And so what you can do is when the piston's in there, is just run around the edge and tap that, and that will make sure that it's perfectly lined up. It's an important step because if you don't get this seated properly, then what can happen is a ring can slip out and then catch on the block, and in a bad day, damage the ring. In a good day, you've got to pull it all apart and recompress it and get it back in there. So just a little tip I wanted to share there. The other thing is that when you're putting the piston in with the ring compressor on it, you do want to make sure that the piston is oriented correctly. It's not twisted this way or that way. It can be a little bit off, but doing it straight down will help make sure that you're going to come down in the journal perfectly square, if I can say it that way. And you're still going to use your fingers on the bottom, on each side of the rod cap, to guide it on the bottom to make sure that it sets nicely on the journal when it comes down. But if it's twisted, it's just that much more prone to create a problem for you, maybe scratch the journal. So set it in straight, make sure the ring compressor is flush. Underneath, protect the journal. 1 or 2 good force with the hammer there, and plastic hammer or wooden, and it should just slide right in. You might have noticed on piston number 1 that I did not put a bit of oil on the skirts. I forgot that. It's part of the things when you're trying to do the video, sometimes you forget certain things, but I did do that for the other 3, and I flipped the block underneath, brought this one down all the way to bottom dead center, and just squirted a bit of oil on those squirts just to make sure that we're happy. It's not a big deal because it was lubricated with WD-40, but to be safe, I wanted to mention that and make sure that you knew I did it for all the rest. And then if I didn't make it clear earlier, it's super critical to get the assembly lube on all sides. So the journal, as well as the connecting rod bearing, as well as the cap bearing. So you want to assembly lube all of those parts. As you saw me do, just make sure you've got that both on the journal and on both bearings, upper and lower. Okay, so with that, I'm going to flip things over and we're going to go for the passenger side. Okay, all 8 pistons installed and turning over really nice. Everything looks good. Just got to wipe things down a little bit inside the cylinders, make sure there's no debris in there, but we are on to the next step. All right, it's time to put the camshaft in. I went ahead and cleaned this really well with acetone, blew it all off, and all we want to do now is hit all of these journals with some assembly lube, not the lobes themselves. This is a Comp Cam's Extreme Energy hydraulic roller. I'll put the specs up in the top of the screen there. This is the one that came out of the old 440. It makes a nice chop in the sound of the engine, and really wakes it up with I think it's 550 or 560 and lift on the exhaust and the intake. I'll put those specs up, but it's a real nice cam. And let me just grab this. The cam bearings were replaced by the machine shop in this block, so they are good to go. They are already loaded up with assembly lube. The reason why I don't want any assembly lube on the lobes is because it can affect how the roller lifters spin on the lobes. We want them to spin, to rotate, not skate. And so all we'll do with these is just put motor oil on them. Once we get the lifters in, we'll douse the engine and motor oil in here. And that's all you want to do with those with those lobes. No assembly lube, nothing else. Okay, so nice and slow. You want to go slow because you don't want to damage the cam bearings. You can always rest right there. All right, one more length to go. There we go. Always want to make sure she spins freely. Spins nice. I think we're in business there. Okay, so that's in. Next up, we need to get ready to do the timing chain. We're doing this part of the engine here so we can get the timing cover on, because with the timing cover on, then we can put the bottom half of the engine on. What I mean is the windage tray, the oil pickup, the oil pan, and really get the bottom of the engine all buttoned up. So we'll start here, then we'll turn it over, and then we'll get underneath, and then we'll go ahead and we'll put the water pump on and get things ready for paint, really. Well, we won't put the heads on yet, but we'll get everything ready for paint, and that'll be what we're looking forward to over the next day or two here. Okay, it's time for the timing chain. And this is the one that came out of the 440. It should still be perfectly fine. Of course, when we get it on here, we'll check to see just how much slack is in there. But I'm hoping it's perfectly fine. We're going to do, just turn that a little bit. You might not be able to see it on the camera, but right there is the dot on the top gear. We want that facing up, and we want the dot or 0 on this smaller gear to be facing up as well. So both up. You don't want dot down here and dot down here, because if you do that, it'll be 180 degrees out. Ask me how I know. So that's what we need right there. So let me just grab that off, slide that on, and then come on. I'll be stubborn now. Okay, I just needed to change position, get my hand in back here behind the cam, hold it while I applied pressure to the timing gear. And I got it on there now. It's good and tight. It might loosen up a little bit once we get things positioned just where they're going to be. To do that, we've got to get our bolts in here. So for that, I've got these 3 bolts right here that have been cleaned with acetone, as well as inside the cam itself. And we do want to use some Loctite on these guys. And then we'll torque them down. These ones go to 45 foot-pounds. Okay, those are snugged up. I'll get them torqued in just a second here. We've got, hopefully you can see, a dot right here, and we got our 0 mark right here lined up. We've also got the keyway here at about 1 o'clock here, and we've got number 1 at top dead center. So this is where we want things to be, and everything is lined up the way it should be. Do want to spin things over here once I get this torque down, just to see how things settle out down here and make sure that we're happy with the tightness of this chain. By the looks of it, I think we're going to be more than fine. But let me get things torqued down. These are going to 45 foot-pounds. Let me get that done. I'll pick you up there. Okay, got those 3 cam bolts torqued down to 45 foot-pounds. As I said before, we're at top dead center on number 1. What I want to do is just spin this 1 full rotation until we get back to top dead center on number 1, and just make sure that we're happy with how everything is spinning here with the cam. So let's get that. And then we're back to top dead center number 1. Nice and tight. That's really good. Happy with that. So timing gear, good to go. Okay, we're getting close to putting the timing cover on. 2 things left that we have to do. We need the cam button. Recall the back of this timing gear has a bearing in the back to control and let the thrust go back and spin properly. And then we've got this cam button here that goes right in there like that, and it spins perfectly like that. And this cam button will come out and hit the timing cover. Now, when you buy this, it's like a default length, and you have to go through a process of shaving material off the back until you get a certain amount of distance. I can't recall it off memory how much distance, but that was all set up on the previous 440, so I know this cam button will be just fine where it is, but you want a certain amount of distance between the cam button and your timing cover. And because it's going to hit the timing cover, but this will spin and it'll go back and forth under load, acceleration, deceleration, and that's perfectly fine. That's what it's meant to do. Reminder, we've got our dots still top to top, TDC. We've got the keyway at 1 o'clock there. And the last thing that we need to put on here is our oil splash shield. And it goes in there like that. So this just flings oil up and keeps that chain oiled and happy. So what we'll do now is I'm going to put lube on this, just some 2050 Valvoline VR1 that I use for the engine, just to get that lubed up and happy. And then we're going to prep this surface, and we're going to put our gasket and then our timing cover on. Okay, let's just get this thing nice and pre-lubed. Okay, let's get this gasket on there. Got the high tack that I typically use that I can't get open. There we go. I just like this stuff. It makes a really nice bond between the gasket and the block itself, or whatever mating surface you got. It's not, I mean, it kind of glues it on, but it will seal up any imperfections, and it will hold that gasket on very nicely. Okay. Now, come on. Now, we take our gasket and we line up our location holes and just stick it on. Just got to make sure that our holes are lined up so that when this sets up, it's not going to move, at least not without damaging everything. That everything, all the holes are lined up. So I'm trying to say. Okay, so I've got my timing cover here. It's the one off the 440, obviously. Still sporting some Hemi orange paint, but I did go through and scuff all that, and it's all clean. You can see here where the cam button hits. But we have a new seal for the crank, so we need to take this and push it in with the press. Yeah, you could probably hammer it in. I've seen some people do that, but I'm going to use this just old bearing race because it fits perfectly over. And we're going to go over to the press and just push that in. Okay, we're ready to put this on. We're going to start with high tack on the timing cover itself. Okay, that should do it. Oops, almost forgot the timing mark indicator. It's got to go on here. Oopsie. All right, these go to 30 foot-pounds. There we go. Starting to look like an engine. There. Okay, good. When we do put the balancer on, of course, we're going to put assembly lube around that seal so that we don't have any tears, but there we go. Okay, while we're in here, I just thought we'd go ahead and put the fuel pump push rod in, and then we can seal up this plug. When we go to paint the engine, we'll just masking tape over this area because I don't want to paint the fuel pump. It's a polished aluminum Edelbrock pump, so we won't do that. We won't put the pump on yet, that's what I'm trying to say. But let's go ahead and put this on. You can see it's got a bronzed end there that goes towards the camshaft. We'll just put some assembly lube all over that. And then down the shaft as well. Okay, now we'll get the plug and seal that up, and then we'll get painted over. Okay, to wrap things up at the bottom of the engine, we've got to put an oil pickup tube in, a cork gasket, a windage tray, another cork gasket, then the oil pan, and all 20 or whatever it is number of bolts that need to go in here to secure it all down. So the first thing I want to do is, might be hard to see, but right here, the gasket that we just put on for the timing chain cover does protrude up a little bit. So that's going to interfere and create a leak for us. So we're going to just go through here and shave that off. There. We will put the right stuff, RTV, right in here for sure. And also back here. Hopefully you can still see the back of the engine there. Yeah. I think we've already trimmed those gaskets that were in the side of that retainer. So we're good. We've got flat surfaces, or as flat as we can get it. So what I'm going to do is acetone this entire perimeter. Then I will do the right stuff, RTV. I'm probably going to do a bead around the entire perimeter of the block for that first layer of the cork gasket. And then we'll put on, we'll do the oil pickup tube, we'll put on the windage tray, another cork gasket, and the oil pan. I haven't decided yet if I want to fully glue this thing up. In previous builds, I do a layer of the right stuff, cork gasket, layer of the right stuff, windage tray, and so on and so on. And so really at each layer I had the right stuff, and it's a real bear if you ever need to get back in the engine. Now, I didn't have any problems with leaks, but I'm not sure I'm going to do that. If I ever need to get back in here, and I did need to get back on the last one because of the rear main seal leak on the last engine, it's just a pain. So I think I'm just going to do the right stuff on this first layer of the cork gasket where I have all of these imperfections, and then take a chance with the cork gasket on the windage tray and oil pan, and hopefully I don't have any leaks. So I think the first thing we'll do before we start to clean this acetone is get the oil pickup tube in there. I think we can do that now, do some thread sealant. Let's get that set up. Okay, let's get this oil pickup tube installed. Now, this is the same pickup tube I had installed in the last 440 block. It's already been tested for its height to the oil pan, because you want about 1/4 of an inch from this location to the bottom of the oil pan. So a 1/4 inch gap between the bottom of this and the bottom of the oil pan. That's already been tested on the last 440, so I know that this, once it's screwed in tight, will be in approximately the right location. Now, oops, I didn't show you, but I got a whack of sealant on here, because if there's one place that you do not want to leak, it's your oil pickup. That's not speaking from experience, but logic. You do not want a leak on this thing. Okay, so now can we get this? Boy. Now I just got to get that flush. Just making sure that that's flush. I'm going to just do a quick check. I don't have the gaskets to fully check, but I want to make sure that, yeah, that I was in the right location. That looks very good. You can see that I've had, when I did the install last time, I had to make room, so to speak, on the windage tray for the oil pickup. So I think that's in the right location. I'll just take a minute and double check all of that before we move on. Okay, I've got the oil pickup now sitting flush this way, that way. We should be in good shape for distance to the oil pan. Now what I want to do is get ready to install the first cork gasket. I just wiped the entire perimeter down with acetone. So now I'm going to go through and just put in a thin line of right stuff. Of course, I'm running this inside the bolts. Little extra here. Extra there. Okay, good. Now let's get that first cork gasket on. You can see I missed that right there. Get my line right. That's good enough. Okay, now let's get this lined up against all those holes. We don't want any issues with that. You can see I've got a little bit of RTV in that hole. I want to get that out of there. I do not want that to create a problem for me later. Okay, we'll just let that set up and then we'll move on to the windage tray. Okay, I have decided that I'm going to put a light bead of right stuff on each of the layers. I just do not want this to leak, so let's get started here. Come on. I'm not going to put a lot, just a little bit. Oops, for insurance. Okay, windage tray. Oh, by the way, important to note that I retorqued all of the connecting rods to 63 foot-pounds. I was looking last night at the paperwork that came with those rods and those bolts, and I told you that it was 45 pounds. That would be for a standard connecting rod, but for these ARP bolts and with those connecting rod caps, it's 63 foot-pounds on those. So just side note, maybe you knew that and were yelling at me when I was doing it. Okay, next bead. Okay, next gasket. Okay, next bead and then oil pan. Let's hope that this never has to come off. Please, 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 please. No rear main leaks. Okay, let's run those bolts in. There, I think that's pretty good. I'll let that set for just a little bit and then I'll retorque them once more. You want to get these snug, good and snug, but not too tight because you'll start to squish that cork gasket out and make a mess of things. So I think that's good. Bottom of the engine is all sealed up. We'll get the drain plug in there. And then I think we're going to move on to the oil pump. Okay, next up is the oil pump. I ordered a new Melling standard volume oil pump, the same that I had on the engine before. I just thought, look, we're starting off with a fresh build here. Let's put a new oil pump on, and it's just a piece of insurance. These are notoriously dirty inside, so we are going to take this apart and have a look inside. We'll have a look and clean things out, make sure that we're happy. Put a little bit of oil in there, and we'll be ready for the oil prime. It actually looks clean, but let's get a clean rag and see what that really looks like. Yeah, that's not bad actually. It's a little dirty, so let's clean this out. This is the bypass valve. If there's an oil filter failure, We'll take that out quick too and just make sure that we're okay with that. Come on. Good grief. And we'll just spray this out with brake cleaner and put her all back together. Okay, that's it. So we'll clean this surface with acetone because we've got a gasket to go on the block, and then that will meet up with the gasket. We'll do our high tack and we'll go from there. So I'll meet you over by the block. While we're here, the gasket kit comes with a new O-ring, which goes on the shaft here. So we'll just lube that a little bit. There we go. All right, let's get the oil pump on. I've got the surface here on the block clean with acetone. This is the gasket. I've got my high tack. Let's just go ahead and get this coated up in here. Okay, I've got this shaft and seal lubed up, and everything else is acetoned. So let's get this in here. Maybe I'll put a little bit of oil on the inside of that. I don't want to tear that seal up. And it was just fighting me a little bit. Got 4 bolts here, 3 the same length. One's a bit longer. I am putting on some Loctite just because. So there. If you're wondering why I'm putting this on now, it's because I want it painted engine color along with all the hardware. Okay, those are snug to get set up to torque them. Okay, I believe these go to 30. Oil pump installed. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get the water pump on. I want that on because I also want it painted at the same time. So I've got gaskets here, and of course, good old high tack. All right, let me grab the water pump and the bolts. Okay, I've got all 6 of those torqued down. I've just got a temporary bolt in here right now because the alternator bracket will go in here eventually, but I don't want to paint that orange. I want it to be black. So that bolt will come out and get replaced with a grade 8 anodized bolt when it's back in the car. But down to 30 foot-pounds on everything, and it should then just settle in nice. So there, I think We are at a point now where everything that needs to be on the engine to get painted is on it. So I think the next step will be to start taping everything off and prepping for paint. Okay, I've got this thing all taped up. It's all scratched and acetone down. I think we are ready to throw some orange on this. Hemi orange, of course. Let's go. Okay, I think I've got the last coat on this thing. Overall, I'm fairly happy. I've used this Eastwood 2K ceramic engine paint before, several times. I've always had good luck with it covering, and I've prepped the engine the same way with acetone and blowing it off, but there have been a few spots that really were stubborn. You can see it's got the gloss. It's a beautiful paint. There's just a few areas on the block that just wouldn't take paint very well, and that's unusual. Like right here, and a couple other little spots. And I also got the paint on too heavy on the oil pan, so I've got some runs happening there. So not thrilled. It looks pretty good. I don't know if I'll do something with those runs or not. I'm going to let that paint cure overnight, and then I could just sand off the run and just repaint the pan. That's an option. I'll make that decision once it's fully cured and dried. I can have a real good look at it. But the area that you're going to see from under the hood does look really good. I mean, we get that all dressed up. I can't argue with that paint. It's got such deep gloss. So there we go. And I also painted up the valley pan. It had a couple fish eyes in it. I think I've got, there's still one small one there. But overall, that looks really good too. It'll be covered up by the intake. So you're not going to see much of that, but I did want to have it hemi orange. So it just looks complete with the orange. Of course, the heads are going to be aluminum with the aluminum intake on it and everything, black valve covers and so on. But just that valley pan orange makes it look better than if it was just any other color, including its default aluminum. So I've got that done. I'm going to let this sit overnight. It needs some good time to dry because I've got 3 heavy coats on that. Well, one light coat and 2 heavy coats on that thing. So there we go. And with that, the short block is finished. We've gone from a bare block and crankshaft to a fully assembled bottom end with the pistons and rods installed, the cam and timing chain set in place, the oiling system is finished, and everything is sealed up and painted hemi orange. It's finally starting to look like the 440 that's going back into this Charger. In the next episode, we'll move upstairs and start building the top end. I'll be installing the TrickFlow 240 aluminum heads, the Comp Cams roller lifters, the push rods, the Harlan Sharp roller rockers, checking the valve train geometry, priming the oiling system, and finishing things off with the Valley Pan and Elderbrock Performer RPM intake. There's still a lot of work ahead, but this is a pretty big milestone in getting the Charger back on the road. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.